The ball leaves your fingertips at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in November, and it rattles the rim of a practice basket in a facility that still smells like floor wax and disinfectant. The arena outside is empty. The janitor left an hour ago. The lights in the main gym are off, but the auxiliary court is still on, because you ask the facility manager, a man named Gerald who has seen 100 versions of you over 16 years, if he could leave them on just a little longer. He did. He always does. You are 36 years old. Your left ankle is wrapped in a compression sleeve that goes from your heel to mid-calf. Your lower back tightens every time you plant and pivot, a dull, grinding protest that your body started filing around year 11 and has never stopped filing since. The shot goes in. You don't celebrate. You catch the rebound yourself, dribble back to the same spot on the wing, 26 feet 3 inches from the center of the basket, and you shoot again. 300 makes from this exact coordinate. That is tonight's requirement. You are on number 211. Your phone has 6 unread texts from your daughter. She wanted to FaceTime before bed. You'll call when you're done. She'll be asleep by then. She always is. You shoot again. The stage 1. The lottery. Rewind 15 years. You were 19 years old, sitting in a chair inside a building that costs more than every house on your mother's street combined. You were wearing a suit that a sponsor paid for, a tie that a stylist picked, and shoes you wouldn't have been able to afford 8 months ago. Your hands are resting on your knees because the cameras are everywhere and someone told you to look calm. You are not calm. Your resting heart rate is sitting at 96 beats per minute. The commissioner approaches the podium and opens an envelope. He pauses, the pause that every commissioner practices, the pause that is worth roughly 11 seconds of television advertising revenue, and reads a name into the microphone. It is your name. The reaction in the room is disproportionate and surreal. People you have never met are screaming. Your mother covers her mouth with both hands. Your agent, a compact man in a gray suit who has been fielding calls for 6 months, permits himself a single restrained exhale. You stand up. You put on a hat. You shake a hand. You smile for a photograph. A photographer says one more 6 times. The hat is 2 sizes too large and rests slightly above your ears. None of this feels real yet. What feels real is the guaranteed money on the rookie contract, $9.7 million over 4 years. What feels more real is the thought that immediately follows. Your mother hasn't slept soundly in 11 years, and after tomorrow, that ends. You smile again. The hat is still too big. The stage 2. The reckoning. The NBA is not a sport. It is a compression chamber. You discover this in October of your first season, during the 3rd week of training camp, when a veteran, 12-year player, 2 rings, a face you grew up watching on television, goes past you off the dribble in a scrimmage, and you reach for his jersey out of pure instinct. He stops, he turns around, he doesn't raise his voice. He says very quietly, "Son, reaching in like that at this level means you just gave up a free throw and an easy bucket, every single time." Then he pats you on the shoulder and jogs back to the other end of the court. That evening, you watch film for 4 hours. You watch every defensive possession you played that day and count the reach-ins. You counted 11. In your first regular season game, you play 7 minutes. You score 3 points. You grab 1 rebound. The post-game box score will list you in a font size smaller than every other name on the page. The beat reporter for the local paper, a woman who has covered this franchise for 19 years and has seen 43 rookies come through this locker room, writes 3 sentences about you. 2 of them mention your potential. 1 of them uses the word raw. You read the article at 1:30 a.m. in your new apartment, eating cold takeout, surrounded by boxes you haven't unpacked yet, because unpacking feels like admitting this is permanent, and you aren't sure you're allowed to believe that yet. The stage 3, the window, year 4. The box scores are different now. Your name appears in the first paragraph of game recaps. The 3-word description that national analysts use when they talk about you has shifted from promising young piece to legitimate second option. You averaged 21.4 points, 6.8 rebounds, and 4.1 assists. Your player efficiency rating ranks 18th in the league. Your contract expires in 6 weeks, and there are 4 franchises willing to pay you somewhere between $28 million and $34 million per year to leave. Your agent schedules the calls. You sit in a hotel room on a road trip in late March and listen to 4 different franchise executives describe their vision for your future. One of them talks for 22 minutes without asking you a single question. Another one mentions his team's culture 14 times in 11 minutes. You take notes out of professional courtesy. But what you are really calculating is simpler. Which city has the best chance of winning? Not the best contract, not the best market. The ring. The thing that separates the great from the unforgettable. You signed for $31 million annually, the 4th largest offer, not the largest. Your accountant sends a detailed email about state income taxes, escrow, and deferred compensation structures. You read it twice and understand about 40% of it. Your mother reads it and understands none of it and is proud of you anyway. The stage 4, the plateau. Year 7 is the year you learn what the ceiling feels like from the inside. The numbers are nearly identical to year 4. The games look the same on tape, but something has shifted in the architecture of your body. The recovery time is measured in days now rather than hours. After a back-to-back in late January, you sit in an ice bath for 22 minutes and feel approximately nothing. The inflammation in your left knee has a name. It has a treatment protocol. It has a maintenance schedule. You visit the team's orthopedist every Tuesday and Thursday, and he uses the same phrase every single visit. Manageable. He's been saying manageable for 2 years. You've stopped asking what the alternative is. The trade deadline passes, and your name is mentioned in 3 different rumor packages on ESPN. A reporter calls your agent to ask if you've been told anything. You haven't. You find out from a push notification on your phone, like everyone else, that you stayed put. The next morning's practice is an 8 a.m. shoot-around before a road game. You are in the gym at 6:15. The assistant coach, a former player who was on the wrong side of 3 trade deadlines himself, sets up the ball rack without saying a word. You start with the same wing spot, 26 feet 3 inches, old habit. He rebounds for you. Neither of you says anything for 11 minutes. That's enough. The stage 5, the renegotiation. Year 10. The organization schedules a meeting with you and your agent on a Thursday morning in late August. The room has floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the practice facility, and the GM, a man you've had dinner with 12 times, cannot maintain eye contact for longer than 4 seconds. The new contract offer is for 2 years. The annual value is $9.4 million, a reduction of 70% from your last deal. There is a second option, 1 year, partially guaranteed, with an incentive structure tied to statistical benchmarks. They call it a prove-it deal in the industry. That is the polite name. What it means is that the franchise is no longer certain you can do the thing you have done professionally for a decade. Your agent does the talking. You sit with your hands on the table, very still, and watch the GM gesture at a laptop screen with your efficiency metrics for the past 2 seasons. He uses the word transition 4 times. None of the 4 times does he look directly at you. You sign the 2-year deal in the car on the way home. You call your mother. She asks how the meeting went. You say, fine. She knows what fine means. She's been interpreting your fine for 36 years. The stage 6, the last one. The final game of your career is not a ceremony. There's no retirement press conference scheduled, no tribute video queued up, no number hanging from the rafters. What happens is simpler and stranger than any of that. You play 14 minutes in a regular season game in late March, score 6 points, pick up your 3rd foul in the 2nd quarter, and sit back down on the bench. In the 4th quarter, with 3 minutes left and the outcome no longer in question, the head coach, your 3rd head coach in 4 seasons, turns to you and asks if you want to get back in. You look at the court. The kid guarding your position is 22 years old. He was 7 years old when you were drafted. He doesn't know that. He should. You tell the coach no. You sit back down. The buzzer sounds. You shake 23 hands in the post-game line. In the locker room, 2 reporters ask you about the trade deadline implications of the win. Neither one asks about you specifically. Gerald, the facilities manager at your previous team's arena across the country, sends a text that just says, "Great career, man." You read it on the bus. You don't reply until the next morning when you write back, "Thanks for leaving the lights on." He doesn't respond. He's probably already setting up for the next guy.